I'm Olivia Clementine, and this is Love and Liberation. Today, our guests are Justin Patrick Pierce and Londin Angel Winters. Justin and Londin are business partners, best friends, and passionate lovers. Known internationally for their transformative work in personal growth and sacred intimacy, they have dedicated their lives to love. They help others deepen in their relationships, overcome the challenges of long-term commitment, and learn how to grow spiritually and sexually with an intimate partner. You guide individuals and couples on the path of sacred intimacy through sexual yoga. Can you share what you mean by these terms? So, sacred intimacy and sexual yoga.
Getting right into the heart of it.
I know, we're just going right in. Every question is right in.
Well, we use the term sexual yoga because we're very passionate about the traditions that have come before. You know, we have great respect for tantric Buddhism, tantric Shaivism, the other forms of meditative, yogic, and esoteric influences that have inspired what we call sexual yoga here in the West. And it's no secret that it has evolved tremendously, that it really is its own practice, it is its own work. So we spend a lot of time, looking into some of the traditions that have influenced what we call Western sacred sexuality, because they're teaching tools. They were, the seeds that sprang this tree into its life. We also understand that this body of work of sexual yoga is new and evolving. And while it's been inspired by older traditions, the work that we do today is a blend of many different technologies and modalities. And it's that blend that gives it this very unique flavor of teaching us as a couple, how do we integrate these incredible, timeless spiritual teachings in a way that's actually appropriate, applicable, and makes sense to a couple living in the 21st century, raising a 3-year-old child, living at home. We're not monks and nuns, we're not in an ashram, we don't have a guru, but nevertheless, this practice is our practice. This is our life. We live and breathe these teachings every single day, but we don't belong to a sect or a tradition that has us adhere to certain principles that would make our life feel incompatible in some way. So a lot of what Londin and I have done through our teachers and through the many different traditions is take these practices and these teachings and integrate them in a way that deepens our love, that establishes greater trust, that creates a foundation of tremendous equanimity as well. At the same time, while we foster the passion that's here, that increases desire for each other, that feel our bond as intimate lovers, and uses that as a pathway for spiritual awakening. So for that reason, we call it sexual yoga, as a means of not trying to appropriate any of the other traditions that have explored sex, and simultaneously continue to look at and work with this ever evolving, relatively new body of work.
Do you want to add anything, Londin?
I would add for the very beginner that there's an element in sacred intimacy of letting your relationship be one of the vehicles of awakening. So many people are in survival mode around relationship. How do I get my needs met? How do I get mine? How do I find the person? How do I live the dream? How do I have the fantasy? You can see so many of the motivations in love serving the ego and serving old narratives, like movies you saw as a 5-year-old that forever embedded your idea of what success in relationship looks like. or maybe putting you in a victim mentality that you're not an agent of love. You're sitting around waiting for Cupid to strike you in the butt with an arrow. There's all of these ways that the ego plays a role in love, because love is such a fundamental button pusher for all of us, right? And in the end, we're all trying to recreate that perfect love we never got from our parents. And so one of the things that Justin and I absolutely love about living and breathing the spiritual practice of sexual yoga is we are absolutely dedicated to waking up around all of this. And there's no better place to wake up than in your intimate relationship if you choose, because your guru sees you when there's an established time. I mean, unless you're in an ashram. Your life coach, you have an appointment, you show up to that appointment kind of ready to do the work, right? Your therapist is there to listen and not really bring their stuff to you. But when you have an intimate partner, it's 24/7. They're seeing you when you don't want to be seen. They're pointing out the stuff you weren't willing to look at in this lifetime. And they're also potentially, if passion's involved, triggering things that are beyond maybe your spiritual path at that moment. And so it's very humbling, but when you actually embrace it as a sadhana, it's an incredible, powerful path to awakening. And so Justin and I are humbled every day in that journey together. And we thought we had gotten somewhere, and then we had a child. You know what I mean? It's like a whole new level of karmic unwinding. So it's been a very rich journey for us, and so rich that we've dedicated our lives to transmitting the teachings that are coming through just our practice. I mean, Justin said, we don't have a guru, but in many ways, our practice is the guru. What does it take to keep my heart soft every day, no matter how badly I feel hurt, or what kind of narratives are swirling in my mind, or what I'm projecting into the field? The softened heart teaches me the way through. Staying awake, keeping my eyes open, teaches me beyond my narrative, right? And so in many ways, this is what we mean by sacred intimacy. It's choosing it as a path of awakening.
I would love to get into actually some of the things you just touched on, but before we go there, will you also share about the alpha omega terminology, and how does that differ from traditional masculine feminine polarity teachings?
I think I'll try and explain it like this. Because when I first came into this work and I learned about masculine feminine principles, which that's how I was trained, and that's how Londin was trained in this body of work, hearing those principles for the first time, there was something incredibly liberating about just hearing it. Like, oh, that's the way I am. Oh, that's the way I understand why she's that way. Oh, suddenly my life and the way I am is making so much more sense. Like there's something something is becoming clear as I hear these teachings and these principles. So that's liberating in of itself. I've got a masculine essence, she has a feminine essence. Okay, we're making sense of all of this. And we began living into that philosophy. It is a philosophy. We began living into that philosophy and playing those out, and tremendous rewards. I mean, just what you're able to do with those distinctions, particularly inside of relationship and around sexuality, is you learn how to create sparks. Like you learn some incredible tools to bring passion back into your relationship and just create this incredible dynamic. Londin and I gave ourselves so completely to this practice that we relinquished and started to, let go completely. Like I began surrendering my feminine side altogether, and she began relinquishing her masculine side altogether. I mean, entirely. And the first thing that we noticed, we were kind of at odds with that process, was like, My background is a creative, I'm an artist, I'm a performer, and all of that is very feminine. I loved being seen and being on stage. Like there was all of that. And as Londin can tell you, I mean, she was a powerhouse in the business world. I mean, the level of success that she's achieved in different careers, all in a very masculine, as we now call alpha, but all as a very masculine role. And she began relinquishing all of that to find her feminine so that I could finally step up and be the masculine. She could step in and be the feminine. What that took for me was a lot of I mean, I took it very seriously. I stopped playing guitar and playing music. Like I sat still for very, very long periods of time for years. I worked very hard to be able to make more money than her, like, because at the time I couldn't even compete with her. Granted, she's also, 14 years older than I am. So I had a lot of catching up to do. I was still just in my early 20s when we met. So I was like, man, I got to figure this out. I'm such a chump. I'm so feminine, I thought. Let me become masculine. But we pursued this path very intensely and we got very skilled at it. We were teaching it. We were really on that path. And London's cracking up. I don't know what memory is popping into your mind at this point.
Just the fact that we took it as like we took it to 11.
Yeah,
it was kind of ridiculous in hindsight. We were like, hey, this is the teaching. We'll do the sadhana. And everybody around us was doing it. So we were like, all right, let's give up our resistances to doing it. That was where we were coming from, was we're not going to question. We'll just dive in, see what this offers.
Mm-hmm. I love the teamwork of intensity.
Yeah, we totally had the teamwork going.
That is what it takes to go that distance. And it's what it takes to get on the other side of it too. And that's where we landed. We landed on the other side of those teachings because at a certain point, we started to recognize that we were living inside of a system of dogma and shoulds, comparing ourselves, how masculine or feminine we were in any given moment. And we started treating each other like bad tennis partners, like you missed the serve. No, you missed, and you're not feminine enough. You're not masculine enough. You're supposed to be feminine. You're supposed to, like all of that nonsense that makes its way, and you begin weaponizing these teachings as dogma. You begin creating weapons out of them. And just that feeling, automatically when you start comparing yourself, right on the coattails of that, you're going to start to feel shame. You're going to start to feel that inner angst, whether you're worthy of love, whether you're trustworthy. All of this starts to come into place, and it did for us. And as it did, we looked at it closely. We really investigated it. And what we started to see was that when we first met, we didn't have any of this dogma in our minds. Our bodies came together naturally. And there were parts of my creative, expressive, radiant light that matched perfectly with her discipline, her drive, her commitment, all of those qualities we call alpha. There was already harmony there in our relationship that didn't need fixing. And there were parts of my masculine that were also polarizing parts of her femininity that also came together and matched. And we're like, wait a minute, this is more complex than merely black and white. There's so many layers to us, and our bodies have come together, like in this symphony of alpha and omega qualities. And then we started to do a very deep dive investigation. What happens when we start bringing those qualities back consciously as a gift to each other and the relationship? What happens when we actually start to explore bringing those back into our dynamic? And we did. And as we were slowly trying to do this, it was a mess. Because we were living,
there were no rules.
We're living like when you have the masculine feminine map, life is very simple. He's masculine, she's feminine. Live it out. Go. This was now like, okay, now we're going to start to bring some agility. And we talk about this in the book, Energetic Agility. And as we were doing that, it was just one like mishap after the next, losing attraction for each other, losing trust, I mean, it was just got very messy. But we stayed committed and we said, no, we're going to discover the gift that's inside of this. And we began working this into our practice consciously until we began to liberate all parts of ourselves. That my masculine and my feminine were both part of my pure essence and both there to be expressed and lived and loved and seen and shared in this lifetime, just as hers were. Her quote unquote masculine gifts aren't less because she's a woman. They're of profound value, equal to any man who embodies these skills. What nonsense have we put into our minds and poisoned our brains to think that embodying these qualities has to be determined by gender? It was such a pill we had swallowed that we didn't notice until the dogma began to eat away. And we saw this happening to other people in these communities as well. They swallow the dogma pill, and we watched this happening to others. Said there's got to be another way. And that was the moment that everything started to shift from us. And from that point forward, we began an exploration and a commitment to each other. I want to know and love and trust all of those parts in you. Mm. And I invite and praise and cherish, and I'm devoted to all of those parts in you. That was the first moment where we really started to experience this body of work as a vehicle for true liberation. Because how can one call themselves liberated if they're only living as half of themselves? If they do not know the full spectrum of that which they are? And that led to a deeper dive to understanding what these words really mean and experiencing them directly as not man and woman, but as consciousness and light. We've all heard those terms thrown around before, but to experience them directly is the point of this practice. And to experience them directly, not merely in degrees, but absolutely, is to recognize at once that they are not separate. They've never been separate. They cannot be separate. And that is why sexual yoga is a non-dual practice.
Londin, do you want to say anything?
We have a standard for our practice that that we get closer to awakening. And that's been our guide. Just, showing up to practice where all parts are welcome. The parts of you that don't like that are the parts that are darkened. Like when he first started showing me his feminine, for example, I had to confront the little part in myself that bought into the idea that if he studied his masculine, I'd get a better man. And he's sharing a feeling. What's that going to mean to me? Oh my God, am I going to lose my perfect parent? Am I going to lose, am I now going to have to be responsible for holding any kind of stress? You can just automatically, when you start dissolving a more patriarchal mode of polarity, it shows you more of where you're darkened. It shows you more of where you bought into the fantasy. It shows you more of subtle agenda in this practice. And so because we dance in the full range, like what Justin would say is like, we play every note on the piano, both of us, every note's included. And as a result, when we're jamming together as artists, the music is so much better. But what you notice is it really calls you out on the places where you're using spiritual practice to feed a hidden agenda. And what I love most about this journey that we went on is just rooting all of that out like a plumber and getting rid of it and having every day be a day that helps us realize the true potential of the bigger dance between consciousness and light. because, you know, anything the ego comes up with is such a hopeless diminishment of what is truly available in the moment. And our practice, ironically, you know, the big fear in these communities is that you will go back to the gutter of neutrality if you do exactly what we're doing, you know. But the irony is our practice was set on fire when we began to do this, because we were allowing that which is true to come through, as opposed to letting the mind decide what's true and play it like an imitation game. Right? You know, the ego is always watching your spiritual practice and trying to hijack it. But when you surrender beyond that, the thing that comes through your bodies, what comes through our bodies in these practices is awe-inspiring, because it's so far beyond anything that you could generate from your own human limitation.
And that became the catalyst to awaken to unconditional love, love without conditions, truly. To say to someone, well, I love these parts of you, but these parts not so much. That is conditional love. But to sit in front of someone and say, I love you unconditionally, all parts of you, there is not a fragment or fraction of you that is unworthy of love, that I do not love, that I am not here for. I'm here with you and I am going nowhere through all of this. To sit there honestly and stare your lover in the eye and breathe deeply into your body and have both of you say that earnestly. That's what this practice is. And it's something we all long for as human beings. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or other. You long to know a love and a connection at that depth. And this practice gives it to you. It brings it to you. And that's what makes this path so profound and so unique, because it teaches us how to awaken through love, through a capacity, a vehicle we all have an ability to give it through our hearts, through our bodies.
I can imagine the listener right now is like, oh my God, yes, this is what I've always dreamed of. It's so true, right? Like we want to know that we're not going to be rejected. We want to know that all of us is welcome. And I'm wondering, what are some examples from a mental and body discipline of ways to encourage this unconditional love within oneself? And then I guess more specifically, what both of you are doing in partnership on a mind-body plane to allow for that, I guess, non-dual or unbiased fullness, full welcome.
Would you like to hear an example of a practice that enables this, or like a life example of this in action?
Will you share both?
Okay, so I'll start with the practice. Creates the sort of channels for this in your relationship, such that when you're in a real moment, it's available. One of the things that Justin and I implement with ourselves and our clients as a skill building practice is we will set a timer. That timer will be 10 minutes. Justin plays the role of Omega, and I play the role of Alpha in those 10 minutes. And it's kind of like borrowing from the original place we were in, where the rules are clear. And so you know what you're doing. You know, you're not jamming right now. You're doing something very specific. So in these 10 minutes, Justin's Omega and I'm Alpha. And as Omega, as you will see, is the feeler. Omega is the one that immerses into the sort of felt experience of the moment. Omega represents the all that is, sort of the occurring world. Alpha is the seer, the one that's witnessing all of this occurring, true? So when we get into those primary polar forces, right, consciousness meets light. Light is the ever-changing. And so how you could sort of feel that in a human body is the feeler, the one that's fully immersed into the moment that is ever-changing. Alpha being the seer, the one that is witnessing this occurring. So when we do these very clear roles of Justin and Omega and me and Alpha, He's going to be the feeler. So for 10 minutes, he drops in and feels his sensations and experience and says, I feel da da da. I feel da da da. I'm sitting in alpha saying, I see. I'm placing my attention into his body as the witness. I'm structuring the moment as the consciousness, and I'm reflecting what I see. And so Justin will offer, I feel for 10 minutes. This was incredibly difficult for him in the beginning, because when is a so-called man given the permission in our culture to feel fully without being shamed? I mean,
particularly in front of his lover.
Right? Not in a men's group where it's like, we're going to do this together, but like in a sexual moment of practice with his lover. So we challenged ourselves to meet. We created this practice. We were like, let's do this. And we did it. And it was so beautiful because it gave me the chance to know my clear role as alpha. And I'm going to see Justin. And I'm going to see him the way I like to be seen. In other words, like, I'm going to bring an alpha that I think is worthy of sexual worship, where I'm going to penetrate him so deeply that I melt his heart. Like, I'm sitting there in that moment, really, really holding myself to this level of practice. And Justin has embraced this practice so beautifully to really bring me the kind of Omega. I can actually, in some of those moments, I can feel what I bring him when I'm in Omega. Like, wow, you're seeing your heart. I feel so honored. Like, you're being so vulnerable. You're sharing so much with me. I'm so honored to feel that level of surrender in you. And so we're doing this practice and we're both sort of opening these channels in ourselves. And then the alarm goes off, 10 minutes, bing. And now we use the energetic agility to switch.
Yeah. And the moment that we switch, you can feel everything that makes alpha and omega different. So for example, when I was the feeler, my attention was in and on myself and on my own feelings. When the alarm goes off, I take my attention and I place it on Londin. I'm no longer obsessing on my own feeling state. My attention is free and on her. My breath, I start to breathe in a way that supports her body as I breathe in sync with her. And I become the seer for her. And in that moment, Londin drops her attention down on her own heart, in her own body. She immerses into her own experience and notices what's there to be felt. And then she says, I feel. And then I reflect back, I see, for 10 minutes. Just doing this 20 minutes, oftentimes at the end of this, there will be polarity, which, just an attraction here that naturally arises. It's not forced. And then 20 minutes after the practice, once we're into it, suddenly we're embraced, kissing, making love, and turning this meditation into an actual moment of real intimacy where it becomes something organic, spontaneous, and alive. But we use that scale to create, as Londin said, open those channels and create that pathway for something to come online and awaken in both of us, right? And what is a healthy relationship where there is equal amounts of love and trust present? It's both partners feeling seen, right? Feeling heard, feeling held, supported, having someone in their presence that they can trust, and also feeling someone opening, their heart opening, their body opening in response to their presence. When you bring those elements together, which this very simple practice does, if it's done well, you start to feel what's possible as these scales evolve into real life moments of spontaneous lovemaking and intimacy.
And I'll give you now a real life example, because you asked for the practice and the real life. So good example. So we do this every morning, by the way. And then it moves into a free-form practice, which is we have, lots of practices we're doing, but this one is a little bit like it's like an energetic agility warm-up, right?
I really like it. Just before we go on, will you also just clarify for the back and forth, are you sharing words or is it all energetic? The I feel, is it your feeling, or I feel, you're expressing what you feel?
Simultaneous. So we certainly put words to it. So I might say, I feel this. I'm just trying to drop into something real here, so it's
I love it. I
useful.
love it.
I feel inspired to be sitting in front of you. I feel loved.
I see an open heart.
I feel strong and clear. I feel devoted to.
I see a beautiful soul.
Now, just for example, we'll reverse that. We'll have London do, I feel.
I feel touched.
I see a badass.
I feel delighted.
I see the woman I swear to protect.
I feel wordless.
So in that moment, something genuine opened, even as we're just doing an example. And then we might not say anything for the next 5 minutes and just literally ride that moment of connection there, just breathing together. We might start touching. We don't know. But in this example, I wanted it to be real for you guys. So we said what was actually true for us. But I want everyone to know that there's oftentimes I will sit in front of London and the first thing that comes out of my mouth is like, I feel like a failure. I feel overwhelmed. I feel distracted. I feel frustrated. So in this practice, we bring all of it. There's literally nothing that is not allowed to be brought. But what we are not bringing in this practice is blame or shame. I feel like you always did that. That's not going to deepen connection. Or
I see you're in your childhood womb.
Yeah. I see you're not being masculine enough. So
I see you have work to do.
So like any powerful technology, it can be weaponized if it's misused. But that's why these mantras we've created of I see and I feel, if you adhere to them, if you really adhere to the discipline of what we're asking you to do, you can navigate some of the most difficult moments that would other be fights, screaming matches between you and your partner. You can use this technology, I see and I feel. And if you abide in the practice of it, you will find that you are able to move on the other side of it. You are able to. And we speak that from experience, not just one or two times, countless times.
And come to the session, deeply committed couples on the verge of breaking up, meaning like they've hit something that they don't even think that they can. And in that practice, they melt those walls. It's really special. It's very divine what can occur when you show up as a yoga and you don't just let the ego run roughshod through triggers.
I really am curious about the everyday example you were going to share, London, because I know the statistics show that divorce, one of the main causes of divorce is everyday household conflict. Just these moments that we just, they build up and build up.
When you talk about divorce coming from those domestic things, it doesn't come from the first offense. It comes from the 10,000th, and then it's so highly charged. It's like an eruption of a volcano, correct? Totally. Well, those things are high energetic charge. And when you study the esoteric arts, you realize that's a lot of intensity in the body. And it's easy to go unconscious and numb around high intensity, like rage as a yogini is a very difficult thing to let ripple across your tissues. True? You know, when you're studying the feminine arts, like you start to realize, oh my gosh, you're asking me to do what? Surrender inside of that feeling, I could be annihilated, right? Well, as a couple, you can be what we call the yoga of intimacy. You can be practicing the opening of these channels yogically, such that when that high energetic charge of that real life moment comes in, your channels are open to stay seeing and feeling, stay awake, stay aware and sensitive, not only to your own heart, but to your partner's heart. Stay non-reactive. Just because we're practicing the responsiveness of Omega doesn't give us free rein to become reactive, shaming, blaming machines. You know, I'm not spitting my venom at Justin ever. That's bad. That's bad practice. That's me innervating a closure of my heart and a spasm of my ego all over the field. And so the real life example that I was sort of suggesting I could offer would be in a moment where I feel an offense, something hurts me, for example. Maybe Justin has a moment of unconsciousness where he doesn't realize that something he said, ouch, came across as an ouch. Because we've practiced these non-reactive ways of softening the heart and expressing authentically, I have access to saying something very vulnerable and soft, like, hey, ouch, as opposed to crossing my arms and deciding he doesn't deserve my love today and giving him a super hard, cold shoulder. Because guess what? When you get triggered that hard, you just want to defend. You want to tighten your belly, harden your heart, maybe say something snarky, and we will say the I feels and the I sees. I mean, not to the best of our ability. You know, I'm not trying to say we're perfect. We're not, but we're studying to be awake and sensitive in the moments that make us want to go completely frozen or flee, you know, or fight.
And that's why in this practice, so much of what we're training our bodies to do is to breathe deeply into the belly. Because when you're reactive, your belly gets tight and your breath gets shallow. So when you constantly train the belly to open and the breath to move all the way down, you're training those pathways to stay open through those difficult moments. As Londin also described, our heart's closed. So all of our practice is how do we actually keep that heart open, right? What does it even mean to keep the heart open? Do I know how to do that? What does it feel like? What does it look like? And you know you're doing it when you can see it's having an effect on your partner. And that's what's so beautiful about this practice is in our own world, we can kind of imagine we're doing all these amazing things and having these breakthroughs. But the moment you stand in front of your lover, they look at you and they're just like, nah. Here, you can't hide. There's no place to hide. There's no place to hide here. And that is incredibly confronting and most profoundly inspiring. And that's what makes this path so unique. That's why I love this path so dearly, because it is that incredibly intimate confrontation that doesn't just challenge your heart, but loves your heart through this process. And that's what we give each other. One thing that Londin didn't say that I want to speak to is, you know, we have a 4-year-old child that just started school like yesterday. Well, I guess today.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, so 4 years is a long time. Turns out. And Londin and I work from home. We work together. So we've had our business together. We've had our hips joined for 12 years. Like we are never apart. And now this child comes into our life. And for those listening, and you know, you may know this, but children are pure Omega energy. They are the feelers. They're not the seers. The moment we come out as children, hear my feelings. yeah, like we are that radiant light of pure feeling without any innervation from conscious thought. As a child isn't going around judging everyone and like analyzing their feelings, and they're just expressions, this movement of life force. So that when they come into your home and your relationship, they're going to change the polarity of your dynamic. And whereas London's Omega was the brightest light in our home for many years, this child comes in and now she's this supernova. And
her practice was way better than mine.
and as a parent, as a mother, to be a good mother, to be a good parent, you have to step into the role of alpha. You have to become the witness. You have to become the watcher. You have to become aware of everything they're doing so they don't hurt themselves. So
you have to structure the day, you know, you're just structuring everything all the time.
So a lot of men and women don't realize when they have a child, both partners are going to go into alpha in a big way. And that's going to depolarize your relationship most profoundly because the child is going to be Omega, supernova Omega. And your eyes won't be able to, you know, you'll constantly notice yourself just looking at your infant, at your child, because they're mesmerizing, right? They're so beautiful. And knowing that pure radiance. And what London and I had to do as soon as she was able was we had to fight to get London's Omega back online and give it a home and a space inside of our house and inside of our relationship. And that London can continue to have an Omega even though we had a child who had a massive Omega, right? These practices are that opportunity for London, where if she's seen for 10, 20 minutes at the beginning of the day, and then 7 a.m. mom mode turns on, then client mode turns on, and then by the end of the day, you're exhausted, just need to pass out. She goes unseen all the rest of the day. That Omega part of her goes unseen. Now, if you go unseen for too many days in a row, too many weeks, too many months, too many years in a row, your heart's going to get stiff. You're going to get cold. You're going to get resentful. You're going to feel unloved. By keeping this practice in our lives, it's like a lifeline. It keeps those energies online and constantly reminds both of our hearts that our feelings matter, that they're allowed, that there's an opportunity for us to be seen. And then through that seeing and feeling, intimacy has a place. Life doesn't just become about function, which everyone wants to do. How do we become more efficient, more effective, more functional?
More productive.
More productive. And then at the same time, how do we find peace in all of that function? Which I want to touch upon this one idea because it's important. But to prioritize intimacy and have this experience is what is required to have a passionate, intimate relationship that endures the test of time. If you do not prioritize intimacy, you won't have it. This life will happily strip it away from you. Everything is fighting for your attention. Your phone, your television, everything is fighting for your attention. Your kids, your job, fighting for your attention. And your lover usually gets the scraps. Here, we recognize that if we don't prioritize that, then the passion and the love that we have here is liable to fall apart. And if that falls apart, then so does everything else. Because then suddenly you are getting a divorce, and then your home falls apart. And then your relationship with your children is strained and frustrated. And their relationship to you is frustrated. And then going to work is just more difficult. It cascades. And it starts with this bond here. This is the most important relationship in our lives for those who choose to be an intimate relationship. It is. But it always gets scraps. Here, we're learning how to prioritize it and prioritize it in a way where it can just continue to feed every area of our lives and make us better parents, make us more clear in our purpose and our mission that we have on this planet, support us there.
tenderize our hearts. And one of the most powerful things about this practice is you begin to see the value of pleasure beyond something that off-rails spiritual practice. Pleasure becomes a gateway for deep listening to the divine. When two bodies merge as one, I mean, you know, this is a deep sadhana, doing sacred intimacy, but the promise of divine union is real. It's not some fantastical thing. Justin and I are experiencing this, where in a single moment, you know, you do all of this intensely vulnerable work to soften your body and let go of your defenses enough that those two bodies can merge. And when that portal opens and that central channel just bursts into the divine realms, it's as if time disappears and the whole slate is washed and you understand everything in that one moment. And then your trajectory is brand new from that point forward. I mean, that's really what two people in deep commitment can bring each other. And there's no other relationship in your life that can do that for you in the same way.
In the very beginning, Justin, you mentioned that you're 14 years younger than Londin. A lot of people get so focused on the outer. How will we age? It's a very big thing, right? Especially for women, I would say, you know, our outer appearances over time. So I'm thinking of a listener who's not in a relationship and focusing so much on appearance, on these outer things. And can we end on, once again, the ultimate aspiration of intimacy? And how do we, as I'm thinking of the listener that's looking for love, how can we turn our mind to what's most important in the path of intimacy and not get bogged down by these things that will always change and we don't have control of?
Well, I could speak from my perspective, and I certainly want to hear what London has to say on this. And I don't know if this experience gets shared enough. But I growing up, I was a person who didn't struggle finding relationship, getting into relationship. My quote unquote poison is desire. I have a lot of desire. I'm a very passionate person, and sexuality was a way that I found to express it. And I was constantly pursuing multiple partners. And before I really got into the spiritual end of things, like I was studying NLP and pickup arts and all these different ways to figure out how could I make myself a better lover, more attractive, and get more partners. And I pursued partners quite ravenously. What I was unaware of at that time, what I was numb to, was how empty it is to pursue sex without deep meaning or love, without real intimacy. And I just remember these key moments of almost like waking up in the morning with someone in my bed. And I was just like, what's this person doing in my bed? And it was just such a empty feeling. And in that moment, I realized something needs to change, but I don't know what that is. I don't actually know, but I know this isn't it. As I started to do more work and dive deeper, particularly into this practice, I began really seeing just how empty it is to pursue sex and all of those intimate partners in the absence of love, and the destruction it was doing to all of those people, and also the destruction it was doing internally to me. And I was really at the end of that journey when I met Londin. And when I first met Londin, being lovers wasn't even really on our radar. I think she was pretty repulsed by me on first impression, because I still certainly had a residue from the way I was before I met her. But what I really took away in all of that is just sex and superficial appearance is just so empty in the end. And sometimes to really believe that, you need to indulge in it to the point that I did. And not everyone does that or has the opportunity to do that. I'm grateful that I did have that experience because I know for certain in my heart just how empty that is. And when I met Londin and felt that depth of connection, and we began exploring what was there, what was really ultimately revealed to me is that you don't choose who you love, and you don't choose who loves you in return. There is something profound that happens when two people feel that opportunity to be vulnerable with each other, and that opening shows them what's there. And it was really a surrender experience for me, finding this path and a way beyond my old habits. And in this moment now, today, I can say with certainty that I am more committed to this relationship and my lover than I've ever been any other day previous. And my attraction for her and what we have here has gotten hotter over the years. Our connection is deeper. And I wake up to literally the best sexual experiences of my life because of our commitment to each other and showing up time and time again to this process. And what has revealed itself to me, what's become available in this relationship, is everything I was trying to get in so many multiple partners, but never could. That it wasn't until I committed and went in deep that it began to unlock a level of intimacy, connection, and sexuality that finally revealed to me that I was home.
I think for those of your listeners who have pursued this path a little bit, they might be able to hear in Justin's story that in many ways what he's reflecting is the freedom-driven being, Alpha, finding freedom in this commitment. He was able to locate the true source of his freedom, which is far beyond some external circumstance. And I would reflect the reciprocal, because the love-driven being is looking to realize love. Anytime you're thinking about a wrinkle and you're stressing on it, what are you really afraid of? That you won't get love. You won't be in the embrace of love. And you've externalized love into something that you get from someone else because of some way that you earned it, like really beautiful skin, dewy skin earns you love, you know? Perky tits earn you love. A booming ass earns you love, right? And so while these aspects are very fun because Omega is beautiful, there's nothing wrong with creating dewy skin and feeling like it represents the light that is surging in your central channel. That's, that saying, right reason, right dose, right timing, medicine, wrong reason, wrong dose, wrong timing, poison. That's when you're using your radiant display as medicine. But when you are limiting yourself, externalizing love as something other than you, and using fear to innervate these aspects of light to then earn something that you already are, you're in the poison of the whole thing. Just to mention the poison of desire, there's the poison of radiance. There's all sorts of ways we create medicine to be poison. And what sexual yoga does is it burns all of that off so you can reclaim the medicine of these very natural forces of duality. And so the true advanced practitioner is constantly feeling underneath the contraction of fear into the true gift of that which is moving through them. And so Justin, for example, is the alpha sexual pole, realizing that he is freedom. Freedom is not something he seeks in multiple partners. He is freedom. He doesn't even find it in me. It's something he is that he brings as the gift. And I am love. It's not something that Justin gives me, but we share it together. But I can only receive it when I already know I am it and I'm bringing it to him and we share it as a gift. When we're in the lack, all we find more of is lack. I don't care if you obsess, make that about a wrinkle, or make that about the size of your thighs, or make that about the, success you have in your Match.com inbox. We can always find a way to externalize that which we actually are. And the only hope that we have in liberation is to realize what we are. And then what sacred intimacy invites us to do is share that. Stop trying to get it. Be it, share it. And then in that surrender of alpha and omega and perfect surrender, the portal opens. And you know it even deeper because you're literally, all of that fucking dross is melted off of you in a moment of realization. And then your daughter screams and you're right back into the mundane. Go wake her up, right? This is what it means to be a householder, really, truly. Like, you're just in all of it and you don't need any of it to be perfect. You're just embracing the divine hot mess that it all is.